I'm Stephen Halpin, and I'm the National Brand Ambassador for the Busker Irish Whiskey. If there was one Irish whiskey that was quintessential, it would be single pot still. A lot of people get confused with this one, so we're going to delve into it a little bit more detail. But essentially, when you see pot still on an Irish whiskey bottle, on the label, it's not referring to it being made in a pot still, although it is. Our single malt is also made in a pot still. But when you see it on a label, it's referring to the recipe. The history of this category dates back to the 1700s. During that time, the Irish were making a lot of whiskey. We weren't declaring all the whiskey that we were making, and the Crown caught on to it. And so they figured that instead of trying to tax the finished product, which they couldn't keep track of, they would put a tax on the ingredient that you needed to make it, malted barley. And so you had to buy your malted barley from a provider. And so instead of taxing that finished product, they put a heavy tax on malted barley. And so the Irish, rebellious as they always have been, they came up with a way to make whiskey in the same way that they had, but by changing the recipe. And so what they did was they used half malted barley, paying tax on only half of the amount of whiskey they needed to make, and then using unmalted barley, raw barley that was readily available for soups and breads. And they were able to combine those two together and get enough sugar to be able to ferment. But what it gave, instead of those fruity floral notes that you would get from a single malt, this was able to give you this deep, rich, spicy note. From that point in the 1700s, Irish single pot still became the predominant type of Irish whiskey. Ireland is proud of its history in pot still. We see it as a nod to our rebellious side. And so this has been the predominant type of Irish whiskey up until we started blending in the 1970s. We are super proud of the single pot still that we make at the Busker. This is a younger version. It's about 4.5 years old, but it is a great entry into the category of pot still. Typically, those start in the $60, $70 a bottle. And so this gives you an opportunity to get in and understand the category and see how great this is. And we're very, very proud of this. But enough talking about it. Let's give it a try. So things to remember. This is distilled in a copper pot still. This is going to be a blended recipe of about 50% malted and unmalted barley. It is going to be aged in bourbon and Oloroso sherry barrels. And what we're looking to do is to bring out the spice notes of that unmalted barley. And I really feel like this whiskey hits that on the head. Up front on the nose, you're gonna get hints of baking spices. Clove is one of the predominant ones. You're gonna get those hints of chocolate, fudge, toffee, and those lovely notes that come from the bourbon barrels. Vanilla, caramel. Let's give it a try. Sláinte. Immediately that spice is going to hit you first. You're going to get that spice note that is quintessential of Irish pot still. And this one being on the younger side, you really get it right up front instead of it having time to mellow out. That's the thing that I love the most about this whiskey, is that you get that spice right up front, followed up by those fruity notes of dried fruits, dried tropical fruits. Banana, there's a hint of pineapple to it. But these are just some guiding cues for you to be able to taste it and find out what you enjoy. The great part about this whiskey is the finish. When we describe a finish, what we're talking about is after you swallow it down, how long does that stick around? A long finish, usually around 20 to 30 seconds, and this has it. It's a very long finish of those spice notes, hints of that vanilla, and the sweetness of toffee and fudge on the back end. This is one I really, really have to try yourself, and I hope you do. Sláinte.